Friends, in this series for I Thought Wealth, we are going to talk on the topic 100x investing, finding 100 baggers. The first question that should come to us is, where should we find them? What should be the hunting ground? When you type 100 baggers, let's say on Google, what will crop up is a list of companies or stories from the past. Inevitably, those ideas will be trading at super expensive valuations, let's say very close to 100 PE. So, in order to become a 100 bagger, these companies have seen earnings expansion and, more importantly, significant PE expansion and are trading at historic high PEs. So that historic high PE is a very strong determinant and contributor to every 100 bagger. Now, assume you begin your journey there. Are you beginning at the right place? That's the first question. So if somebody says, I want to have a 100 bagger, should he look at, let's say, a Page or a Bajaj Finance, or should he look where nobody is looking? In 2000, when everybody was looking at tech stocks as 100 baggers, because the past performance of tech stocks clearly showed that they were the only 100 baggers, you are getting the TTK Prestige and SRF at sub 100 crore valuation. Over the next 20 years, those have become the not 100x, probably very close to 500x, right? TTK was trading at 20 crore valuation, market cap, SRF maybe a little more than that, 70, 80 crores. So, in the last 20 years, those who found those 100 baggers were looking at a place where valuation was low and nobody was looking at. Effectively, it's very clear to me, and I can say it with a lot of confidence, that looking at the 80 PE, 100 PE stocks is not going to give you 100 baggers so easily, most probably not in your lifetime. So, you need to first understand that if your journey and your aspiration is to find a 100 bagger, you can't do it in a 100 PE stock. You can probably learn from the journey of that stock and interpret that learning in some other nascent place. So, the place you begin cannot be a high PE stock at peak earnings. Where you start really matters. So, you need to start at a place where the idea is nascent, but the opportunity is going to run for a very, very long time. Look at the last 30 years when you have had so many 100 baggers. Most of those companies looked expensive to start with. So, this video is not about not buying expensive companies, but we could still buy those companies cheap over the next decade. So, the starting point should not be where those companies are expensive. You should not be looking at buying them when they are expensive. You should be looking at buying them when those very companies become cheap. To give you a clear example, TTK's IPO was at 6-7 times the valuation that I mentioned. Over a period of 4-5 years, the valuations kept dropping and it came to a level which was 1/6 of the IPO valuation. If you want a 100x, a 100 bagger, that point has to be captured in your purchase in whatever stock you are looking at. So, you can't just blindly get into a stock which is trading at a sales multiple with no profits and still hope to do that 100 bagger. You have to wait for that company to come into a valuation zone where it starts making profits, where its profits will start compounding at a rate faster than market understands or assumes, and where the market fails to see what you are seeing. So, the journey first begins with the wait. You have to wait for what you want to come to a place where you want it to be. You can't start by moving out of your comfort zone into a zone of super comfort in which that company is seeing its own price discovery. That zone is good for the company, it's good for the investment bankers, it's not good for the guy who wants to do a 100-bagger. This clear understanding has to happen if you think that many of the IPOs which are coming now have such potential, because I believe that some may have that potential. Many experienced investors have said that some of these companies could become what Infosys became over a decade, or even what TTK Prestige became over 2 decades. But you can't buy them now. So you must know where to look, how to position yourself, what to do in that initial phase, which is waiting, and how to prepare yourself and tune your judgment, bringing it to a place where when you make that judgment to buy, when the decision is before you, staring at you, forcing you to act, you are fully convinced, fully prepared, and ready to go for the kill. So, the starting place of a 100-bagger, where you start investing itself, is after a while going to show itself to you. It's not going to show itself on day one in a stock. So you need to study a universe of companies, preferably not in very high astronomical valuations, and follow their journey to a point where they become screaming buys. So simply closing your eyes, looking at which company did 100x in the last decade and buying them is certainly not going to give you 100x in the next decade or even few decades. They probably will give you experience of time corrections, learning lessons of how you ought not to have taken recency bias into decisions. So when you see a 100 PE, understand that is not the starting point to a 100-bagger. You need to wait even to begin in those companies. In the meantime, you can look at other companies which I ignored and see if you can find a few which could potentially become 100x. So where you begin is very, very important. Set your field in such a way that you are not going to play it wrong, not going to play to the wrong field, and not going to set yourself up for disappointment. So where you begin is crucial, and you need to understand that that place has to be a zone of comfort. 100 PE cannot be that zone of comfort if you want a 100-bagger in reasonable time. So this simple starting lesson is what I have learned over the last 30 years, be it in FMCG companies in the early 90s, or in the Pidilites and Maricos in the mid 90s, or in tech in the late 90s, or now in the TTKs and SRFs and Deepak Nitrites of the world. This is a very simple point with which we begin. In the next few videos, we'll move on to the more important points and keep discussing them. Do stay tuned with us on this journey towards finding 100-baggers. This is going to be a great collective learning for you and me. Thank you.